Hello, dear friends. It's time today for a bit of humor, but it's a job for the Chinese to collect and sort out as many new items as there are these days. Opinion piece. Model 7 scooter. New scooter culture. They want us to travel by scooter. The electric scooter is already unstoppable. Its top speed is 25 kilometers per hour. Poor and ecological as Davos wants. The pavement is sacred in Latin culture. The bicycle was once a symbol of misery. It's starting in areas with steep terrain. Protests against poverty in Argentina. Attempt to salvage economic narrative fails. It is impossible to escape a major recession. Ryanair announces the end of ultra-cheap fares. Mike Maloney predicts gold to rise by the end of 2022. Fulford says all the financial system is bankrupt. Energy crisis turns international trade upside down. Brazil projects record crop harvest of 263 million tons. Let's start. The electric scooter has become a favorite mode of transport for young and old alike, the cleanest, easiest, fastest, and the most agile way to get around town. As if that weren't enough, it also adds a touch of fun and is a favorite with the youngest members of the household. One of the great advantages of the electric scooter is not having to suffer long waits in traffic jams, and you won't have to keep driving around to find a parking space. In fact, there are now folding scooters which makes it easier to transport them on the bus or metro. When I was a kid, I got a lot of bumps on my scooter because it was very unstable. But now many young people ride electric scooters as if they had discovered gunpowder, because the elite who control society say it's very environmentally friendly. A classic scooter was a toy that consisted of a boat on wheels, fitted with handlebars to steer it, on which children slid by putting one foot on it and pushing the other against the ground. The advantage of modern scooters is that they are electric. And those of my generation will remember Captain Tan's famous Model 7 scooter on black and white Spanish television. Captain Tan is such a captain that he looks like a rataplan, with his inseparable Explorer's salakot and a striped t-shirt was played by Felix Casas. Whenever he had the chance, he would tell of his travels with the following phrase: "In my travels throughout the length and breadth of this world." The Chirripiteflauticos was a very successful children's program that was broadcast in the afternoons in the late 60s and early 70s. Its characters included Locomotoro, Captain Tan, Valentina, Uncle Achilles, and the Malasombra brothers. In 1970, when they went on to have their own program, Locomotoro disappeared and was joined by the clone Poquito, Fileto, Capocómico, and the boy Barullo. It was the biggest children's television success in Spain until the arrival of Los Payasos de la Tele in early 70s. Fragility. In Latin culture, the pavement is sacred to pedestrians and must not be entered. On the other hand, the pavement is a space that is increasingly more for cyclists and scooters, with combustion engine vehicles no longer being such a protagonist. I am tired of seeing extremely powerful and fuel-consuming cars and motorbikes in traffic versus extremely fragile bicycles and scooters in traffic. But the middle ground is missing, which is where the virtue is supposed to be. Bicycles are very healthy on flat terrain, with cycle paths and less motorized traffic, as in the Netherlands or Denmark, but very tiring on steep terrain and very dangerous in traffic. In fact, there is a sense of fragility when you see a skateboarder riding on the shoulder of a road. Cities are transforming against the clock to adapt to a new form of mobility marked by sustainability. Although cars and motorbikes are still the two main alternatives for users, followed at a distance by the public transport. In recent years, personal mobility vehicles such as bicycles and above all electric scooters have burst onto the scene with extraordinary force. A massive eruption that has taken citizens and institutions by surprise, who are trying to adapt their way of life and structure to enjoy their many advantages and to overcome the disadvantages of their sudden appearance. Most accidents involving electric scooters are due to the fact that it is a vehicle that can go quite fast and drivers do not brake in time. In Spain, the circulation of electric scooters, like other personal mobility vehicles, is regulated by the Reglamento General de Circulación, and they cannot exceed a speed of 25 km per hour. They are prohibited on pavements and other pedestrian areas. It is also forbidden to use them on crossing interurban roads, motorways, dual carriageways, and urban tunnels. Anyone traveling on an electric scooter may be fined for traffic offences. Electric scooters are considered to all intents and purposes as conventional vehicles subject to the same traffic regulation as the rest, and can therefore be sanctioned for not compliance with the new general traffic regulations. Definition: an electric scooter is a self-propelled scooter powered by an electric motor. The rider is usually standing up. The minimum age of use of this vehicle must be between 14 or 16 years, depending on the legislation of each country. Electric scooters are sometimes referred to as e-scooters. However, they should not be confused with electric scooters that are ridden in a seated position, as this can be categorized as a mobility vehicle. The term scooter is misleading, as these vehicles are not powered by the foot, but by an electric motor. Electric scooters have become increasingly popular since the late 2010s, especially from 2017 to 2018. The current trend towards electric mobility shows that, especially in cities, many people are looking for an alternative to cars with internal combustion engines. Electric scooters make it possible to cover short distances quickly, from the place of residence to a train station, a shop, or the workplace. In this context, we speak of last mile travel. Some models with a longer battery life can cover medium distances without any problems. The bicycle. I remember that the bicycle, like the pedal car or the fishing rod, was considered a symbol of misery during the years of development in Spain, because it was very reminiscent of the hardships experienced after the Spanish Civil War, and yet now it was become something ecological and healthy, although not so much for the many cyclists who have died in accidents when mixed with road traffic. In fact, to drink that you fish yourself or to see someone else fishing with a rod is an announcement of misery, but to drink that you fish with the net means an improvement in your situation, which will be better for the bigger the fish you can catch. If we dream that we fall off a bicycle, it means that we will lose the money we have risked in any enterprise or business. The bicycle is a good and happy dream if you get right it yourself, but it is someone else. Be wary of friendships. The bicycle is a personal transport vehicle propelled by humankind. It is propelled by the traveler himself, who drives the vehicle with the muscular effort of his legs, in particular by means of pedals or cranks. It is a healthy, ecological, sustainable and economical means of transport, valid for both urban and rural areas. It is widely used in most of Europe and has become one of the main means of transport in countries such as Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, parts of Poland and the Scandinavian countries. It is to say, on flat terrain. In Asia, it is the main mode of transport, especially China and India. Bicycles were very popular in the 80s and later in the 50s and 70s. It is currently experiencing a new boom, and its use is growing considerably all over the world due to the high price of fuel, as it is very ecological and economical. The bicycle has been featured in films such as Bicycle Thief, Death of a Bicyclist, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, The Bicycle Flyers, Bicycles Are for Summer, Cinema Paradiso, The Postman and Pablo Neruda, Ghislaine Lambert's Bicycle, The Bicycle and the Green Bicycle. Economy. The Bitcoin is over $24,000 for the first time in many months. The value of the first currency is rising strongly. Inside sources say Bitcoin would rise before the collapse and then crash like a swan song. The ripple effect would be felt from one country to another as China's stocks and companies reach all nations. Mike Maloney predicts gold to rise by the end of 2022 to 2,187 troy ounce. With inflation rising ever higher, many investors are turning to hard assets such as gold to help protect their savings. And while gold has held its value more than most other assets this year, it has not yet risen as much as expected, leaving many investors asking the question, where is the gold price headed? We are likely to see the price of gold rise sharply. Energy crisis turns international trade upside down. Germany has posted its first trade deficits since 1991. It is impossible to escape the recession, and it is going to be a major recession, explains Javier Echeverri, Director of Active Trades in Spain. Attempt to salvage the economic narrative fails, according to the X22 report. Central bankers are trying to convince the public that they have solved the fuel and inflation problem. This narrative will collapse in the coming months. The Inflation Reduction Bill will increase healthcare costs and destroy the economy. It is perfect and safe to start making big changes in the world financial system, opines Mid-Mess Fair. In his opinion, the West should start and make a big announcement to save itself and also make a better society. If the US, Australia, UK, Canada, Japan, etc. can simply present the new international currency programs to the public, then it would be the end of the CCP. Excuse me. It's the air-conditioned. The agenda of the Great Davos Restart has always been to break the markets and then bring in a global currency with digital tracking and human traceability. It would be absolute totalitarian control that is failing for lack of consensus. Fulford says that the whole financial system is bankrupt and that the coalition is trying to undo the spell of control over the global mass, so the journey to the awakening will be more intense and turbulent than expected. When the crash occurs, banks would not move money, transactions would be frozen, power companies would not be able to pay for natural resources like coal, and delivery companies would be paralyzed. This would lead to closed markets, shop closures, and food shortages. Spain. The price of electricity rises by 9% this Friday. Flames continue to scorch forests in Galicia, Extremadura, and Castillas. Air passengers increased by 62.9% in June, and AVE passengers by 82.2%. AVE means train, high-speed train. Spain receives 294 Afghan ex-collaborators and their families. The nearly 300 Afghan refugees who have arrived in Spain will come to centers in Madrid, Zaragoza, and Guadalajara. The largest photovoltaic plant in Europe starts operating in Cáceres. Spain doesn't rule out a scenario in which Russia cuts off gas to Germany and endangers the European economy. Germany advocates building a gas pipeline from Portugal through Spain and France. Spain welcomes the German proposal to increase gas imports and calls for greater European involvement. Spain sends medicines and medical supplies to Cuba to help those affected by the fire in Matanzas. Americas. Protest against poverty in Argentina. Thousands of citizens responded to the call of social movements to camp in front of the Casa Rosada. They are demanding social improvements in front of the presidency and a meeting with the new Minister of Economy, Sergio Massa. Social movements march in Argentina demanding more aid. UNICEF says that 1 million children in Argentina avoid a meal for money. Argentina registers the biggest inflationary jump in 20 years. Argentina has recorded the highest inflation in 20 years, and the government is calling on businessmen and trade unionists to achieve stability for 60 days. The consumer price index rose by 7.4% in July and has already exceeded 70% for the year. Argentina places its debt in the local market for $1,305.5 million. Argentina signed contracts to build a key gas pipeline for Vaca Muerta. The United Nations appoints an Argentine Rear Admiral as chief observer in India and Pakistan. Southern Chile will remain under state of emergency for another fortnight. A mysterious 200-meter deep hole continues to grow in the Atacama region of Chile. craze in Chile after the opening of the first IKEA shop in South America. Ecuador celebrates the beginning of the independence process that culminated 200 years ago. A journalist is murdered in Ecuador, and 2 suspects have already been arrested. The journalist was the manager and owner of the digital platform Hola Manta TV. He was also a candidate for councillor of Manta for the Citizens' Revolution. López Obrador announces that the rescue of the miners could happen this week. International tourism in Mexico rises 7.8% in June. Bank of Mexico raises interest rate by 75 points to 8.5%. A narco-cumbre sparked a wave of violence in Jalisco and Guanajuato and ended with 16 arrests. On Tuesday night, some citizens reported gunfire, road blockades, and the burning of vehicles and commercial establishments in 2 Mexican states. Identification Now demand relatives of the disappeared in Mexico for the creation of a national forensic data bank. 30 August marks the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances. A bill to ban fracking in Colombia has been reintroduced. A Colombian government delegation travels to Cuba to negotiate with the ELN. The normalization of the border with Venezuela has Colombians excited. In quotes, 40 years ago, the US would have done everything possible to prevent the election of Gustavo Petro or sabotage his government, says a Biden advisor. New scandal for Pedro Castillo. Bolivia's exit to the sea could cost him his job. Peru's Congress proposes a document in which it will ask for the president's political disqualification for 5 years. The president of Peru, Pedro Castillo, affirms that he will continue to work for the country despite media persecution. These statements come after the public prosecutor's office opened a 6th preliminary investigation against him. Pedro Castillo's sister-in-law turns herself into the Peruvian justice system as a defendant. A nuclear center in Bolivia, one of the largest projects of the Russian state-owned Rosatom in South America, will be operational by 2025. Popular marches against President Yamatei's administration and corruption. A report by Human Rights Observatory warns of cases of torture in El Salvador. Brazil projects a record agricultural harvest of 263 million tons in 2022. In Brazil, are presented manifestos in defense of democracy and justice before the presidential elections. USA. A huge sinkhole swallows a car in El Paso, Texas. Fire tornado forms in California wildfires. The phenomenon originated northwest of Los Angeles County, where the flames consumed some 60 hectares. US inflation gives the economy a breather, falling to 8.5%. The US announces a new African strategy to counter China and Russia's activities. JP Morgan gold traders found guilty after a long trial for identity theft. Trump's candidates prevail in US Republican primaries. The courts will decide whether the government pressured Twitter to suspend Trump's account. Attorney General Merrick Garland says he personally approved the FBI raid on Trump. State infighting. Justice Department points fingers at FBI for Mar-a-Lago raid disaster. General Flynn wants biggest threat in state security complex. Lieutenant General Michael Flynn has warned that the U.S. faces an unprecedented threat from within, following the FBI raid in Florida earlier this week. The biggest threat to our country right now is clearly internal, he said in quotes. Storm Ryder claims the FBI chief is a white hat and that the raid is a decoy to dismantle the agency. Eric Trump says security cameras at Mar-a-Lago captured FBI agents behaving inappropriately. Trump says FBI agents rummaged through Melania's clothing and personal items. Report alleges FBI has had personal involvement in Mar-a-Lago raid. Agents were looking for Spygate documents. The judge who signed the Mar-a-Lago search warrant was formerly a lawyer who represented Epstein's associates. The FBI had an informant infiltrate Trump's home to spy on him and told them where various documents were in possible violation of the Presidential Records Act. Jim Stone asks, because only 6 or 7 people knew where the safe the FBI raided was, and there is a question floating around. Who could the FBI informant be? He thinks it would be Jared Kushner. Breaking news. Incident at Cincinnati FBI building. Multiple shots fired in standoff. A gunman displaying an AR-15 style rifle fired a nail gun at an FBI building in Cincinnati on Thursday morning, prompting a police chase and gunfire on an interstate, authorities said. There is an ongoing police chase in Clinton County that closed 2 highways and caused a gridlock in the area, according to NBC News. Musk sells Tesla shares for $6.9 billion in case he is forced to buy Twitter. Europe. Thousands evacuated by wildfires in France amid record drought. Several European countries sent reinforcements to quell forest fires in France. Traffic on the border between Spain and France returned to normal due to the fires. The German finance minister plans a €10 billion tax relief. Ryanair announces the end of its ultra-low fares. Brussels sees US aid to buy made-in-USA electric vehicles as discriminatory. Ferrari recalls nearly all vehicles sold in the US since 2005 for a possible failure in the braking system. The US wants the European Union to abandon its policy of neutrality towards China. Ukraine. The United Nations expects a sharp increase in the ship traffic with Ukrainian grain. The United Nations presses Russia and Ukraine to avoid a nuclear disaster in Zaporizhia. Ukraine attacks Zaporizhia nuclear power plant again. Ukrainian military carried out the attacks with multiple rocket launcher systems and heavy artillery. Russia convenes the Security Council over attacks on the Zaporizhia power plant. Russia to the United Nations, in quotes, in the event of a catastrophe at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, all responsibility will be borne by Kiev's sponsors. A series of explosions rocked the Russian-controlled Crimean Peninsula. China shows a record trade surplus, but still faces the risk of slowdown. It recorded a rise in exports in July, but slowing global demand may force it to turn to domestic demand. Xiaomi unveils the Cyber One, a bipedal humanoid robot capable of recognizing human emotions. The robot can identify whether a user is angry or happy, and can even comfort them in times of sadness. The robot can identify whether a user is angry or happy, and can even comfort them in time of sadness, thanks to its visual technology, environmental recognition, and artificial intelligence algorithms. Sierra Leone imposes curfew after several deaths following mass protests. Moon in Aquarius. The super full moon is here, by Dr. Xavi. The super full moon in Aquarius arrived on Thursday, August 11th. A super full moon is when our lunar orb is closest to a planet and is approximately 15% brighter than a usual monthly full moon. The lunar energy of Aquarius is in a square with Mars, Uranus, and the North Node in Taurus. However, because Aquarius and Taurus are fixed signs from the tropical perspective, there will be people on both sides of world issues who will insist that events unfold as they want them to. They will work feverishly to achieve that outcome, but the side that thinks it has won will be surprised, because Uranus is full of unforeseen events that change everything. The portal of the supermoon overlaps with the portal of the Lion's Gate, causing even greater intensity with the Sun in real Leo, and focusing on world leaders and their plans, and the turmoil affecting the world's population in various ways. Because the moon represents emotions, a supermoon enhances all that is felt. Thus, feelings are much more intense. World events will be much more acute: political chaos, social upheaval, economic challenges, religious turmoil, war, and more. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.